The risk of an 8.0 magnitude earthquake shaking up California in the next 30 years has increased dramatically. That's just one important update from the U.S. Geological Survey that says quakes can jump from one fault to another as far as 7 miles away. My guest, Pat Abbott, is here to explain why these details matter. And Pat, the USGS found there's an increase of this 8.0 magnitude earthquake over the next 30 years in California. We actually have a map of that forecast. We're looking at it right now. What are we seeing here? We see red faults and orange faults and yellow.
Well, you see there, they look like panels. Of course, the faults go down 10 or 12 miles deep. And when you see that, like, for example, you start at the lower right-hand end of California, you can kind of follow the San Andreas Fault all the way up to the north. And you see the faults and you see them, those depths, and the color is something about the frequency. The purplish reddish end, those are the ones that give off big earthquakes, 6.7 and above more often. And then the bluer areas, not as much of a chance of the fault moving or being shaken severely in those areas.
Sure, so the big red line we're seeing, that's the San Andreas Fault. And then here in San Diego, it's the orange. So still significant, but not as big as San Andreas. These results were calculated, what we were looking at with these maps and the projections on them, on 300 fault lines in California. How were these faults identified, and is it more faults than we used to think we had?
Well, yes, it is. Both of those. We do it two main ways. Geologists, we map the lines, the offset lines along the earth where you see where rocks have been moved. For the seismologists, the more of the little earthquakes, epicenters, don't have to be big ones, that you plot below the surface, you start defining planes and recognize faults that don't even break the surface. So we now know of more faults. They don't all break the ground. That's why the number increases so much now.
More three-dimensional knowledge sort of got you to that number. We knew earthquakes could jump from one fault. We've known for a little while they could jump from one fault to another. But this report finds that they can jump much further than previously thought. Give us an example of how a jumping earthquake might cause a bigger magnitude, or what it does.
Well, you know, when we look at the faults, they just look like two-dimensional lines on the surface. But at depth, some go down straight, but some of them curve. And some of them may meet each other. So in other words, instead of just saying one fault moving, if it jumps and causes another one to move at the same time or shortly thereafter, that's the whole energy business. The longer a fault moves, both in terms of distance and time, it's emitting energy the whole way. So if one fault also gets the second one going, bigger earthquakes. And that's what comes out in the statistics.
How do jumping fault lines, you were just touching on this, how do they actually increase the magnitude? So wouldn't it diffuse the energy if you had the San Andreas Fault shift something and then that bumped? By the time it got, let's say, hopefully down to us on a Rose Canyon Fault or something, wouldn't it diffuse it? Why does it increase the magnitude?
The faults, even at 7 miles apart, those are still relatively close. Now, the worst case scenario I know of was in 1957 Mongolia, and that looks a lot like LA. There's a big, long San Andreas-like looking fault, and that started moving, and it triggered effectively two Northridge earthquakes along its path by causing, as it's moving along like this, it caused some other ones to move like that. And the more faults moving, each one of them is generating energy. You keep adding them up, therefore it's a bigger magnitude shake for us.
Sure. Let's talk about this impact of going from a 7.8, which was a predicted number for a magnitude in California, to now an 8.0. What kind of difference would that make when it comes to the actual results of having an 8.0 earthquake in Los Angeles, in San Diego?
Well, it's huge. You know, the numbers are deceiving. You say 7.8, 8.0, that's almost the same thing, isn't it? No. No, a magnitude 8 earthquake is the equivalent of 35 magnitude 7s. So when you go up each tenth of a point, you're having significant increases. So it's more like a doubling of the energy release, and well, that's a huge effect on us.
Do you think that our building codes and our earthquake preparedness could handle that big of a jump, 35 times more than a 7.8?
No, 35 times more was from a 7
to an 8. I understand.
And this is 7.
Okay, but still.
California does a very, very good job on earthquake codes and even in enforcement. When we compare to other events in the world, like for example, the Haiti earthquake in 2010 was basically the exact same thing as happened in 1989 up in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have 60 dead, they have 250,000. What's the difference? Buildings. Californians have been very good about reacting to each earthquake, seeing what went wrong, where did things fail, and then change the building codes to reflect that.
All right, Pat Abbott, thanks so much for the update.
Good to be here.